Vertical integration is when you have parts of the value chain that you've brought into your company. So as an example, in our company, we work directly with investors. So we don't have a middle person that raises capital for us. We work directly with our own investors.
Welcome to the Physicians and Properties Podcast, the show where we teach you how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want.
Doctor!
Now, here's your host, Dr. Alex Schloe.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Physicians and Properties Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Alex Schloe. Today, we have with us a powerhouse real estate investor, someone who I look up to greatly, who I've been following along in their journey, who has just had exponential growth as a real estate investor. Today's guest is none other than Dr. Staggeberg. Dr. Elaine Staggeberg is a psychiatrist, a mother of four, who just recently went to Disney World, owner of Black Swan Real Estate. She owns and manages a portfolio of over $300 million in assets. Through real estate investing, she's reached financial freedom in her 30s, and she now helps others do the same. And she has changed an incredible number of lives through real estate investing. Black Swan has delivered exceptional returns to hundreds of passive investors through their unique investor-focused private equity funds, which enjoy no sponsor fees whatsoever, 100% return of capital investments before any splits, long-term returns, and tax advantages, all coupled with socially conscious investing and at least 5% donated to charity. Elaine was just so inspiring, and this conversation just left me so motivated to crush it, both in real estate and also in life. It made me think about mindset and a lot of limiting beliefs I've had and realize that perhaps I'm thinking too small when it comes to real estate investing, when it comes to building our real estate company, and when it comes to growing Physicians and Properties and reaching more folks who need to hear this message. So without any further ado, let's get started with today's amazing episode with Dr. Elaine Staggeberg. Physicians and Properties Podcast. Today we have a really special guest straight from Disney, just recently returned from an epic trip to Disney World with her friends, Dr. Elaine, with her family and her friends. Dr. Elaine Staggeberg is with us tonight. How are you doing? So good to get to talk to you today.
I'm doing well. Excited to be here. I'm sure we'll talk all about Disney and their business magic and learning from great brands and sharing our real estate story as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we'll just hop right to it. Do you mind sharing with the audience just a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Elaine Staggeberg. I'm a psychiatrist. I trained at Mayo Clinic. I'm married to my husband, Nick. I'm sure we'll talk about him. He and I grew our real estate portfolio together and run our company, Black Swan Real Estate, together. We have 4 children under 8. That's definitely our biggest hobby, how we like to spend our spare time. Certainly when we think about legacy, our company is part of that, but the children definitely more so. We're real estate investors. We started investing even before I started medical school. I'm sure we'll talk about that journey. And then along the way, just grew and grew organically, started working with passive investors. And now Black Swan Real Estate is a company of about $350 million in assets under management, both single family homes and large multifamily, principally headquartered in Rochester, Minnesota, home of the Mayo Clinic where I trained, and then also Tacoma, Washington as our second market. We have single family homes, large multifamily. We're deeply vertically integrated. We do our own property management, our own maintenance, lawn care, snow care, all sorts of things. So run a lot of operational businesses in addition to the real estate investing side. And just excited to, talk about whatever's on your mind and share some of the lessons I've learned along the way.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. A lot's on my mind now after that introduction, for sure. You guys are really crushing it. So really excited to have you on the show. So started investing in real estate before medical school, it sounds like?
That's right.
Wow. How did you get introduced to the idea of real estate investing?
So kind of long story short, both my husband and I had really financially challenging upbringings. Nick's mom was very physically ill and struggled to work because of that. Unfortunately, his father was never in the picture. And then unfortunately, my family struggled with drug addiction and all of the chaos and financial concerns that go with that. So when Nick and I met very early on, we knew that we wanted a very different financial picture for ourselves. And we also knew that we were on the trajectory in our careers where if we just kind of stayed on those tracks, we would have high income. So he was a software engineer. I was planning to go to medical school, both high paid professions. If we just kind of, we probably would be okay. But we also had some sense that we wanted to have more security than that. So we asked people around us, we couldn't really ask our parents, but we asked people around us, like our friends' parents and, coworkers and those sorts of things that were a generation ahead of us. Like, well, what are you doing in your marriage? What are you doing with your children? What are you doing with your money? And the common theme we heard over and over was real estate investing. And so we knew very early on that we wanted to do real estate investing. And we both owned our own home before we were married. So we kept my home, converted it into a rental, moved into Nick's home. One of the things that I don't often share, because I kind of forget about it, doesn't come up, is we house hacked his house. So while we were living in his house, while we were married, we still had roommates. So that we didn't even have to pay our own mortgage. That really helped accelerate our early wealth. Is if you take two income earners and take off the biggest expense of the table, then we were able to shuttle that money into buying our first, what I call purposeful investment property. That was a BRRRR business model. We bought a very distressed property, renovated it, did a lot of the renovations ourselves with sweat equity, did a cash out refi, got all of our money back, plus had that cash flowing rental. And basically just decided on that day when we had that check in our hands and like the cycle had that we would do whatever it took to make that day happen as many times as possible in our lifetimes. And so we just kept investing and creating the company we have today.
That's amazing. What year was that when you guys had your first BRRRR and you had the house hacking?
I was in 2011.
2011. That's awesome. Yeah, house hacking, to just kind of double back on that and plug that more, is such an incredible way to get started. We still house hack our basement here in our primary residence, Colorado Springs.
That's awesome.
It's just a separate apartment. It's awesome. We typically generate about $1,500 to $3,000 per month, depending on seasonality and so forth. And it's amazing. Some months it covers every expense we have for our home, and other times it's the majority of the mortgage. And it's just such a game changer to then have that money that you can invest in other properties and other assets. So really cool to hear that that's how you got started.
And if you're a physician and you're listening and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want a house hack. I don't want some crazy roommate from Craigslist. Like, it need not be that. We were younger. We rented to friends that hadn't gotten married and those sorts of things. But even after we moved to Rochester, we continued to house hack for a little bit, renting rooms in our homes to visiting medical students who were coming here for their fourth year clerkships. And it was just such a beautiful way to give back to folks a little bit younger than us. I mean, we all know how hard that fourth year is when you're traveling all over the country, doing interviews, trying to do these away rotations. So you get to do a little mentorship, get to make a little money. Like, there's so many ways to do it that doesn't have to be like a creepy dude from Craigslist. Like, you can house hack if you want in ways that provide more than just financial benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's a win all the way around. And I think if folks are listening to this who are residents too, another great way to do it is get into residency, buy a house, and then put all your residency buddies in it too and rent out rooms to them. So there's a lot of great ways to house hack and to get started and kind of get a little taste of what it's like to manage a property and have a investment property as well. So really cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I talk about house hacking all the time because it's just such an incredible way to get started and to expedite your investments down the road. So that's cool. So the BRRRR, the house hack, and your home that was turned into a rental property to start off with in 2011. How did growth kind of go from there?
So after that first purposeful investment, things actually slowed down for a little while. We kept saving. We moved to a much more expensive market. That was through my residency match. I had all of these limiting beliefs that this market was too expensive, that we wouldn't be able to make it in a new market, all sorts of things that I think all investors have in the beginning of their journey. Your mind will tell you so many reasons why it's not possible or going to be a disaster. And there will always be that person at a dinner party or whatever it is. Oh, you don't want to get calls about toilets. And one time my brother had a rental property and it got ruined. Like, they're always out there, but we knew that we were committed to it. So we finally found another property here in Rochester that we were able to do a BRRRR play on. That one was a grand slam. I think we walked away with like an additional $100,000 in equity above and beyond what we had invested in it, because it was such a deep value add. And then we just kept going. And in the beginning, I have a chart where it kind of looks very slow and steady, and then it picks up a little bit, and then it becomes exponential growth. But it was one property one year, two properties the next, 6 properties the next, 25 the next, 100 the next. And then now we have 1,300 doors. But it was always just sticking to knowing that our buy box was any property that we could acquire it, do a deep value add play, get all of our capital out as quickly as possible, have it be cash flowing after we placed that new mortgage on it, and then do it again. And then along the way, as we built the machinery, then we started working with passive partners to have additional capital to, really put the fuel on that train. And then once we reached financial freedom, it was just a question of, do we keep going because we have the financial freedom that we're seeking here, or do we stop? And it was just so obvious to us that, of course, we would keep going so that we could help as many other people as possible with the same business model. If it worked for us to build all this wealth for our family, we could do the same thing and build wealth for other families as well.
If you don't mind me asking, kind of what was the financial freedom number? What was the thought of like, hey, this is when we get to this point, we've really made it for you? What was that for you guys?
That's an excellent question. That's one I don't get very often. And what I did that I felt like was very motivating for us was we had several numbers along the way, because the real number was we wanted like $1 million a year in passive cash flow. Well, it takes a long time to get, and it can seem like, well, that's just impossible, so I won't do it, right? Again, our human minds tell us these things of, you know what, I'll just put money in the stock market instead. So instead, we started really small. And it was basically, I knew we wanted to cover our own health insurance. And then I knew that we needed to cover like our bare minimum living expenses. So that would be like our mortgage, food, basic transportation, like one vacation per year. So that number was about $80,000 per year. And when we hit that number, that's when we just had just this sense about us, just this like a freedom sense of we could walk away from our careers. Now we didn't, because we wanted more lifestyle at that point and we loved our jobs. But that was the number that felt like if I wanted to just resign tomorrow and Nick wanted to resign tomorrow, we could. And then the real decision was when Nick stepped away from his career. I was still in medicine, and it worked out so well that kind of all the stars aligned. And we had this way that basically I was able to sign up for moonlighting shifts at a local hospital. And if I signed up for about 20 shifts per year, I would earn Nick's entire salary. So that was kind of this way for us to explore financial freedom, like almost on training wheels. So he stepped back from his 6-figure career in tech. It was a huge deal. Neither of us had ever been full-time entrepreneurs before. But essentially, we knew that if I worked all those shifts, our whole household income would be the same over that whole year. In his first few weeks as an entrepreneur, he earned his entire year's salary in just a few weeks.
Wow.
Like there's just something about being an entrepreneur and having the time freedom and having a little fire under you to be motivated. And so then that gave us so much freedom. I was able to give away some of those shifts, cut back on that. I think I only worked like maybe 10 shifts that year. And then that gave him such creative freedom in that first year to say, okay, well, I've already earned all the money I need to earn for this year. How do I really want to build the business? So that's kind of a long-winded answer to that financial freedom number. But kind of long story short, I encourage people to think of the smallest number possible that like you could get by. You wouldn't necessarily have the lifestyle that you want, but you would have the freedom that you want, and then build on that number from there of, okay, well, now the real number is 150,000. Okay, well, now the real number is 200,000, whatever it is. But if you set that goal too far out early on, it can seem so unachievable that your brain will just tell you to stop. So set a goal that feels attainable, reach it, and then keep moving the goalpost.
Right. Yeah, completely agree. I think having those SMART goals is really important. And then also having that big, hairy, audacious goal at the end is also important too. So you have something to work for, but that's really cool. And I think a lot of times we get kind of wrapped up in this concept of financial freedom and think like, oh, I have to make so much money to completely quit my job and completely do everything. But I think financial freedom is kind of a spectrum of passivity, and like it can just be financial, like some freedom, like the freedom to work one less shift or the freedom to not have to moonlight anymore. And that's still important. And so I think that folks kind of get lost in the sauce of like, hey, I have to have all this money coming in and the ability to quit my job and go sit Mai Tais on the beach and go from there, which that's great. But a lot of us physicians are hard chargers, and we're probably never going to be at the point where we're just sipping Mai Tais on the beach and not doing anything ever.
Most humans are not wired that way, right? As a psychiatrist, I would have patients that come in and they would be traditional retirement age and they'd be so excited. Dr. Staggeberg, I have this great update for you. I'm going to retire in 3 weeks. And they would not get the facial expression from me that they were hoping. I'm like, okay, well, what is your plan to stay active? What church are you going to be involved in? What school thing? What volunteer thing? What family members do you have? Because humans are meant to stay in motion, not necessarily income earning activity. That's where that freedom comes from, whether it's traditional retirement or the early retirement that many of us are seeking. But humans love to work. We love to stay in motion. We love to stay engaged. Very few of us truly want to just be on a beach for years at a time. We want that for a small period of time, and we want it when we want it. But most humans want to work. They
Yeah.
enjoy being engaged.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. We want the freedom to go to the beach when we want to, for as long as we want to, which is typically a couple weeks and you're ready to go. I love that. And I think it's something that gets missed a lot in some of the communities that we're in, of like or they see folks who are so far past where they are and don't realize like, hey, this takes time. Real estate takes time. But you guys started out with a handful of rental properties and you just kept going and chasing after those goals. And then you've gotten to this incredible portfolio. And that took a lot of time, a lot of effort, and to scale that. So I think that's something that gets missed. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Are you still practicing psychiatry at this point in time?
I am not. No. So
Okay.
Nick stepped away from his tech career in 2019, and then I stepped away from medicine in 2020. The story there is that decision was really born from a lot of pain. So if you had asked me in 2017, 2018, will you be stepping away from medicine in just a few years? I would have said, no way. Like, I'm just finishing my training. Like, I've worked so
Yeah.
hard for this. And it was because of COVID. So we had 3 children at that time. And it just seemed like every day that phone was ringing, that someone had an exposure at school and couldn't go back to school for 10 days. And Minnesota was fairly strict with all those quarantine rules. And I was canceling patients left and right. There was just so much pain everywhere, right? Like, I wasn't giving good care to my children. I wasn't taking good care of my patients. I always feel like I was being pulled in all these different directions. And I said to myself, like, I have financial freedom. Like, why am I doing this? Why am I causing myself so much pain? Let's just step back, take a year off. A vaccine will eventually come out. Things will settle down. School will come back to normal. But then by the time that year came around, it was just so evident that I would keep running the business. So I would say the journey to step away from medicine was probably accelerated by 5 or 7 years, all because of the pain of COVID. But when we lean into the painful areas of our life and we ask ourselves, how is this happening for me? What greater good can I make happen of this? That's often some of the best breakthroughs that we ever get. And so in retrospect, I'm so grateful that I just felt like I was being torn in all these different directions, that I had to take a deep breath and say, this doesn't have to happen. I have this resource of financial freedom that I've created over these years. Let's use it to loosen up this pretty desperate situation that I was in with childcare.
Well, sorry you went through such a painful experience, but really cool to see and hear about the outcome on the other side. It's really hard for folks, I think, about even stepping away from medicine and kind of comprehend that, because being a doctor is a large part of our identity, and that doesn't necessarily change if we step away from medicine. But how was that an issue that you struggled with? Was that something that you struggled with as you're kind of working through, should I continue with psychiatry or not? Did you have some difficulty from kind of a mental health perspective, or even like an acceptance perspective of that?
Absolutely, right? Because of the length of our training and because of how much we have to give to it, both in terms of the time, the intellect, the missed experiences and other areas of our lives, that shared bonding that happens with other people in our profession, it becomes a part of our identity much more than many other professions. And what I had to tell myself was, number one, it's a piece of my identity, right? Like, just because I'm a physician doesn't mean I'm not a wife, or doesn't mean I'm not a mom or a friend, or that I've had these other aspects of my career, or that I'm a real estate investor. And I keep my license active. I really leaned into a message that comes from the book, The Alchemist, which is you can always go home. So The Alchemist is a story about a shepherd boy who's traveling like sometime in the Middle Ages, kind of around the world, and all of the adventures and mishaps that happens to him. It's a really beautiful fable, and it packs in all these huge life lessons. And the big one is that you can always go home. And so that really gave me so much freedom to say it may be hard, and I may struggle with malpractice insurance or need to do retraining programs or whatever, but there's plenty of people that have left medicine for a long time, maybe to be a stay-at-home parent, maybe because they had a health problem, maybe to take care of a family member, whatever it was, and they found a way back. And so if I left medicine, I could always go home. And there's never a day that there's like a proclamation of like, no more medicine, right? Or at least that day hasn't come for me yet. There's just a decision that today I don't practice medicine. Today I run the company full time, but I can always go home. And that gave me so much identity freedom that it wasn't like a line in the sand was being drawn. It was just a decision for what I was going to do with my time in that given day.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I kind of picture of like putting down the white coat, but picking up another coat and then continuing on. It's that white coat's still there. If you want to pick it up, put it back on, you can totally do that. And really cool story. Lots of folks feel the same way, have felt the same way since COVID. I mean, I'm sure we're both on the same page of medicine's in a very rocky space right now, and there's a lot of burnout. and a lot of difficulties with administrative burdens and everything else that's going on. What's like one tip of advice that you'd have for someone who's right where you were, like right where, hey, I'm thinking about leaving medicine and doing something else? What would you say to them?
I think one of the greatest lessons I've learned from coaching in my lifetime is taking full ownership for our decisions, taking full responsibility for our life. And I think some of that is just in American culture. We're kind of numb to that. But I think particularly in medicine, we sort of lose some of that. We become kind of a part of a machine or a cog in a bigger system. But when we really step back and we remind ourselves that we are human beings and we are capable of infinite things, practicing medicine is one of those things. And it is a beautiful, honorable thing. It is a blessing to be a blessing to other human beings in their time of need, but it's one of many things that we can do. And when we have full self-agency and full self-acknowledgement that we get to make the decisions about our life, and like all of this sounds like very simple, but it's a breakthrough that I find that people have as they're on their way to really massive success, that we can have kind of moderate levels of success when we don't fully step into that. But to really have massive levels of success takes stepping into and saying, I take full responsibility for all of the decisions that I make. I have full control over the decisions that I make. I'm completely responsible for this. And then from that place, you're empowered to make decisions and to come up with various pathways from a much higher place, from a higher self. It just kind of flows through you. For me, it was, hey, I'm just going to step back for a year and see if a vaccine comes out, when schools settle down, kind of the world, and then I'll just reassess then, instead of kind of getting stuck in perhaps a mindset of, well, this is a forever thing, or what does this mean about who I am as a person, or what does this mean about my identity? I was able to shed all of that and say, my highest self right now takes full responsibility for the options that I have, and I'm going to make a decision to step back and reassess in a year. And that was so much easier, again, than kind of circling back then to like drawing this line in the sand and saying that things, would always be different after that.
Well said. That's perfect. I think about Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership, taking ownership in everything.
One of my
you do.
favorite books. It's one of our core values of our company,
Yeah,
extreme
that's
ownership.
great. Yep. And it should be. Yeah. It's an incredible book, incredible mindset. That's really awesome. Well, let's, if you don't mind, kind of pivot back towards the company. So what did it look like after stepping away from medicine and stepping into the company? What did that look like for you?
So at that point, we were managing our own portfolio of properties. We had worked with many debt partners along the way. So those are folks where, we paid a fixed interest rate on their capital, but we didn't share in any equity in those projects. We had a property management company at that point. We had always managed our own properties, and several years before that, it had gotten to our portfolio was too big for us to just, physically self-manage. So we had built a property management company to manage our properties. And then people just, kept coming to us, and it was very organic, saying, hey, it looks like you've had a lot of success with this real estate investing. Can I invest alongside you? And so we launched fully Black Swan Real Estate. And that really has been like such a special project for us, because we've been able to serve so many people with passive investing, but we've been able to do it in a way that's completely outside of the industry norm. So some of the things that we do are we have no asset management level fees whatsoever. So we have no acquisition fee, asset management fee, loan recourse fee, capital event fee, disposition fee. There's all sorts of fees that general partners can charge. And as a psychiatrist, I know that humans are motivated by rewards. And if you have a set of income that you can earn that's different from what limited partners can earn, you're probably going to have behaviors around earning that income. And that disaligns incentives between GPs and LPs. So we just don't charge any of those fees. 100% of all of our profits go back to our partners until they're completely repaid. That just made good sense to us. It was just so intuitive to us that of course we would do that to de-risk our partners and to kind of recognize the trust that they're placing in us in our deals. And so to de-risk them as quickly as possible. And then we do that BRRRR business model. We get to where we have a full return of capital as quickly as possible to our partners. And then we accelerate the velocity of that capital to then invest in the next thing and the next thing, and to get to an infinite rate of return and hold those properties indefinitely. We've never sold a single asset. So a lot of the ways that we have structured our company and have structured our private equity offerings completely different than the typical model in real estate private equity, because we were able to come at it from such a different lens. We were able to bring Nick's experience in tech, my experience in medicine, particularly as a psychiatrist, and really understanding human behavior. And then really our experience as investors and saying, hey, if we created our own wealth with this business plan, it makes intuitive sense then that when we scale it, we'll use the same business plan. Even though that's not typical in private equity, if it worked for our family, then surely it would work for other families. And it's just been so neat getting to see how much investors love that, how much investors see that it's a very good model of doing private equity. Our big goal, our 20-year goal, is to change private equity, is to make it that more operators are doing deals the way we do them, because we think it's a good way to do business. We think it's an ethical way to do business. We think it puts the investor first. It aligns all of the incentives. And so in that early period after Nick leaving tech and me leaving medicine, that's really when we got to brainstorm, how do we take this thing from building our own family's wealth to building the wealth for many families, but doing so in a way that feels very intuitive and aligned with our core values?
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, in so much transparency, it sounds like, with returns and with the structure of the deal. You're exactly right. A lot of times there's sponsorship deals and all these different deals that the GPs, or maybe not deals, but all these different fees that are wrapped in. So sometimes you do get some GPs who really just want to close and purpose a deal, a reacquired deal, so they get another sponsorship fee. And there's a lot of different ways. So it's so cool to hear the transparency, the structure, how you guys hold properties long term. I've never sold a property. That's amazing. Yeah. So really cool. Very refreshing to hear that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. So Washington and Minnesota, those are the big market you guys are focused on. Any reason in particular those markets? I know Minnesota, where you trained, and very familiar with, but any reasons or any things that you look for in terms of a market?
Yeah, so both of those, Rochester, Minnesota, and Tacoma, Washington, are what we would consider to be the blue ocean. So there's a book by W. Chan Kim, which is The Blue Ocean Strategy. It's basically the idea that a shark can swim in the red ocean where there's other sharks eating fish, and they can say, well, there might be some fish there. Or they can go to the blue ocean where there aren't other sharks eating fish and have to find a bounty for themselves. And both of those markets are very much that. So a big part of the reason we love Rochester is because it's home of the Mayo Clinic. Rochester is home of what's called the Destination Medical Center Initiative. We could do a whole 30-minute talk on the Destination Medical Center. It was just studied by the World Economic Forum as an example of how a public-private partnership can be so great for communities. It's the largest ever public-private partnership in the state of Minnesota. But more importantly, it's the largest per capita spend on infrastructure anywhere in the country, which is saying a lot for a rather small town in the Midwest that's seeking to double the population of Rochester so that Mayo can grow its workforce so that it can continue to serve as the destination medical center of the entire world. So there's all sorts of jobs coming in, all sorts of growth. And the plan distinctly does not include housing. They've left housing to the private sector, private developers. So there was an opportunity there as we were growing our business to say, wow, there's a great reason to stay and to really double, triple, quadruple down on Rochester to fill this need for the clinic with all of the new patients and new employees that are coming in. And then Tacoma is very similar. So Tacoma historically was a very industrial town. There was the largest ever copper smelting plant in Tacoma, literally a toxic waste dump. And the EPA came in the early 90s and did what's called a Superfund cleanup. And that site is now $1 billion residential redevelopment. It's just beautiful. There's multifamily housing everywhere, new shopping, movie theaters, restaurants, all of that. And so that has really changed the character of Tacoma. And our projects are all within just a few miles of there. So we're kind of figuratively benefiting from a rising tide raises all boats. So we're able to do value add projects in communities that are already rising from market appreciation because of the organic growth in those communities. And then we're able to do so in a way where we have a lot of market dominance because there's not a lot of competition here. I'm sure many listeners have lots of different emails and newsletters that they're getting from lots of different investment groups, and you don't hear about Rochester and Tacoma. We're the largest single housing provider in southeastern Minnesota. That gives us a lot of power here in terms of our property management company, our vertical integration, being able to have all of the services that we have, like lawn care, snow care. You have to have a lot of concentration to make it worth it to have that big maintenance team, all of the equipment, everything that comes with that. And then we're building that parallel structure in Tacoma as well.
That's fantastic. Wow. And you mentioned vertical integration a couple of times now. What does
Mhm.
vertical integration mean?
So vertical integration is when you have parts of the value chain that you've brought into your company. So as an example, in our company, we work directly with investors. So we don't have a middle person that raises capital for us. We work directly with our own investors. We broker most of our own deals. Nick's a licensed real estate agent. I would say he's represented us in probably about 70 or 80% of our deals. We have our own property management company. So we manage our own, we collect rents, do maintenance tickets, tenant relations, all of the things that go along with that. We have our own maintenance company to service all of the general handyman stuff. We don't have like licensed electricians, plumbers, those sorts of things on staff. We still vend that out. We have our own in-house facilities team that does all of our cleaning and minor landscaping. We have a lawn care team, a snow clearance team. So all of those things that would typically be large areas of the P&L, those are large expenses for managing an investment property. We're able to cut out that middle person. And instead of that profit going out to a third party, we're able to keep it at the asset level. So that's really good for our investors because it allows us to increase the NOI, which allows us to get to that cash out refi faster so that they can get their return of capital. And then we benefit from that infinite hold period, that indefinite hold period, that infinite rate of return period. But people ask like, well, are all of these various parts of the company profit centers for you? Not really. We tend to run most of them basically at a break even because yes, we could make $1 in that area of the business, but real estate is based on NOI and cap rate. So NOI is net operating income, all income minus all expenses, and cap rate is the capitalization rate. So here in Rochester, we're at about a 5 cap rate, a 5% rate, which means for every dollar of NOI, the value of the property is about 20x that. So for every dollar we're able to save in expenses, we're able to increase the value of the property about $20. And then because we have a split of that, we're actually able to profit way more by keeping our assets very profitable rather than by profiting in all these various line items on the P&L. So we basically look at all of the expenses on the P&L and ask ourselves, how can we eliminate a third-party vendor, bring that part of the business in-house to decrease cost, increase quality, increase control, deliver the brand standard that we want to our investors and to our residents, and in doing so, make the value of our assets even higher.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, thanks for just giving us a masterclass on business structure and vertical integration and the importance of that. And also hit on just commercial multifamily or commercial properties in general and how these little tweaks and changes can add so much value to the property down the road. You've also mentioned infinite return and kind of BRRRR investing. So if folks aren't familiar with that, do you mind just kind of explaining that as well? BRRRR investing, infinite return, how an infinite return is even possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the wonderful things about real estate investing, as opposed to most other types of investing, is that you can use bank leverage, right? So you can't really use a loan for stocks or bonds or crypto or those sorts of things, but you can, and it's common to use a loan in real estate. It's a mortgage. So because of that, you're able to get to an infinite rate of return. So basically what happens is you acquire a property, you do physical renovations and management improvements to increase the value of that property enough such that you can go to the bank and say, I've increased the value enough. I'd like a new mortgage at this new higher amount that will pay off the original mortgage, return the down payment, and maybe even some additional profit. And then you just pay that new mortgage payment, but you've returned all of the original capital back. It's one of the only ways that I know of that you can get multiple types of returns from one bucket of money because you just use that bucket over and over. Again, kind of that theme of like, what if wherever there's pain in your life, there's often an opportunity for growth. So all the way back when Nick and I first started investing, I had just left my career so that I could start medical school. We had just gotten married. We were hoping a baby would come along. We were at the point of our lives where we had the least amount of money, but we knew we wanted to invest. We also knew that we did not have enough income that we would be able to just generate a new down payment over and over again. So we had to use a business model where we were able to use that down payment, buy the house, renovate the house, get a cash out refi, get the whole down payment back out so we could use it again and again. And then ever since that very first time when we sat there in the car with our cash out refi check that completely replenished our bank account, plus paid off all the supplies and stuff that we had put on our credit cards, and we had the nicely renovated property with a nice family living in it, and it was cash flowing, we just said, we'll do whatever it takes to do this day as many times as possible in our investing careers. And I don't know if we would have done that if it wasn't for the fact that we had to do that. That was the only way that we could continue to invest, was to get our original down payment out. That's what allowed us to scale our portfolio so quickly. It's what allowed us to generate many streams of income from lots of different properties, despite the fact that we started with just one single bucket of money in the beginning and just spending it over and over again.
That's amazing. Yeah, the most important thing is getting started. And you guys did that. You got started and you just kept snowballing and snowballing to where you are now and just had that growth. So I think if folks are listening to this and they're thinking, oh, I need to have tons and tons of capital to get started investing in real estate, you don't. Here's a perfect example of how you can just take that down
Absolutely.
payment and keep snowballing and going from there. I
That's
know
right.
we're getting pretty close on time here. So I wanted to hit on a couple more things here real quick, if you don't mind. How do you balance everything? How do you balance being an incredible mom, doing these awesome Disney World trips, running Black Swan, being a great wife? How do you balance all that?
Lots of different answers to that. A couple that are top of mind for me right now is having a really good team, right? So in our company here in Rochester, we have 50 full-time employees. We have 30 full-time employees in Tacoma. We have a virtual team of 6 folks. So there's people that are running the company alongside us every single day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all the holidays, right? Property management is a lot like medicine, that it never stops. And without that team, we wouldn't have the company that we have. So knowing what my unique ability is, Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach really encourages people to figure out, what is your unique ability? That's something you have, a gift that you were born with, something you're very interested in, something that comes very naturally to you, and then do that thing, and then surround yourself with other people who are doing the thing that's in their unique ability. That's how you create great ecosystems. That's how you create great companies. I also have a great team supporting me on the home front. So I think, particularly speaking to fellow women, like, all of the data shows, no matter how supportive our partners are, women do more household work. It's about 8 hours per week more. Well, imagine if you could lower that amount, how much additional time that would give you to invest, to take care of yourself, to feel like you have freedom, right? Maybe it's not even the financial freedom you're really going after. It's just a little freedom to exercise or get an extra hour of sleep or get a pedicure, those sorts of things. So building a team at home, someone that cleans the house, someone that does some basic cooking, like just relinquishing control and knowing maybe it's not exactly how I want it to be done, but it's done. And that frees me up to do these bigger, better things that are part of my unique ability. That's something that comes to mind. And then another thing that's top of mind for me right now is knowing what balls are glass and what balls are rubber. And you're putting balls into your juggling rotation at all times. And you have to know at any given time how many balls you can have going, but how many of them are glass, and you never drop the glass balls. And you're constantly dropping the rubber balls. And I remember when Nick taught me that many years ago. Nick was just much more entrepreneurial than me, even in the beginning. And as a physician, I was like appalled by that. Like, there's no such thing as rubber balls. Every patient report, every lab test, right? There's nothing that you do as a physician that's a rubber ball. But that's not true in most of life. And that's certainly not true in running a company, even taking care of children, all of those things. So you just need to know what your glass balls are, know what your rubber balls are, know when you're going to drop them, where they're going to be, when you're going to pick them back up. And that just allows you to juggle so much more and to do it somewhat effortlessly, because you really only need to focus on, most people really only have 3 or 5 glass balls. Your health, your spirituality, your loved ones, your main passions in life, your work product. There's very few things that are a glass ball. The rest of it, you can drop, you could throw those balls off to other people in your team. You decide when you pick them up. Those are some things that are top of mind for me today in terms of doing it all, so to speak.
Yeah, those are great tips. First time I heard that analogy was in the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. They talk about juggling the balls. And yeah, and I think about it even more sometimes too, with the glass balls, of like, sometimes you need to throw some balls higher so they stay in the air longer, so you can juggle the other ones a little bit more too. And so it is a balancing act. But yeah, that's a great book, The One Thing by Gary Keller, Jay Papasan. They talk about that a lot as well. And I think balance is something that, especially as physicians and as folks that are just real go-getters, it's something we're always going to struggle with. And realizing, yeah, there are ones that I can drop, there's people that will help, and there's plenty of tasks that I'm doing that I don't need to do that can provide more time or more value to my company and more value to the family. So yeah, that was a perfect answer. Thanks for sharing that.
Elon Musk also says, never optimize that which should be deleted. And so I think that's just a great question that we can all just pause and ask ourselves, like, whatever it is, if you're thinking like, man, this is taking up a lot of time, the first question we should all be asking ourselves is, do I even need to be doing this? Not do I need to delegate this, or how do I optimize it, or how do I bring in a tech system or whatever to make it easier? Just, do I need to do this? Can I just stop doing it altogether? Are there any real consequences from that? You can think of it as unfortunate, or you can think of it as fortunate. But like, the truth is, a lot of what we do as humans, we don't need to do it all. And if we just get rid of all of those things, then all of a sudden we have a few extra hours per day to do the things that we really want and need to do. So really take a lesson from Elon and never optimize that which should be deleted.
I love that. I haven't heard that quote before. That's great. We just recently went on a 10-day road trip, camping trip, my family, and we're staying in the camper and stuff. And I love going out and not having cell phone service and having that time to get away and really focus on the things that matter most, which is my family and spending quality time with them. And I remember thinking like, oh, all these things are going to happen in these 10 days that like really need my attention. Shoot. Like, I was barely on my phone, and I think I got like 4 or 5 text messages of consequence and email of consequences that just needed some action at some point when I returned. There was nothing that was urgent. And then I get back home and it's immediately like, oh, that busyness creeps back in. Parkinson's law of work is going to expand to the value that you give it, or to the space that you give it. And so it was just really interesting to see. So I think a good exercise folks can do is like, just go away for a weekend, turn your phone off, and see like what really happened when you weren't on your phone, you weren't on email, you weren't writing in patient charts and those sorts of things. So that's great advice. Awesome. Well, what is Black Swan working on right now? Or what can folks, if they're interested in investing with you and getting involved with the fund, how can they do that or find out more?
So our main website is meetblackswan.com. Tells you all about us, the history of the company, the portfolio. You can sign up for our newsletter. We have a once monthly teaching call where we teach on a particular real estate topic and then do Q&A. We also have our quarterly updates where we give live performance updates of our funds. And then if someone's interested in putting their name on the wait list for investing with us, they can do that at blackswanfund3.com. Fund 3 will be structured the exact same way as Fund 1 and Fund 2, with that payback period as quickly as possible, that indefinite hold period, and that infinite rate of return, long-term residential real estate, both single family and large multifamily. And so people can put their name on the list at blackswanfund3.com.
That's awesome. We'll be sure to put all those links in the show notes. Anything we didn't hit on, anything else that you want to touch base on before we wrap this up?
The thing I say to everyone that I think blessedly is becoming a more common drumbeat in our circles is mindset is everything, right? So investing is 20% mechanics. You can figure out who to invest with, what type of business plan, what NOI is, and all of those things. As physicians, we can learn that stuff very quickly. We're very sharp. We're very intelligent. Mindset is so much of it, of choosing, who do I really want to be? What are my values? What's the legacy I want to leave behind? And then money's just a driver to create those things. So I try to spend at least 25% of my own time in coaching groups and masterminds, lots of great communities I've become a part of. We have our own event in Rochester for our group, the Black Swan Real Estate Real Life event. We spend about 80% of that time talking about mindset, because even people who see us as the real estate experts, they don't necessarily want to learn real estate from us. They want to learn mindset stuff from us. So for every minute you're spending on real estate, spend 5 minutes on mindset, and that will propel your journey so much faster.
That's amazing. Well, this episode's been packed with just so much value. Thank you so much for coming
My pleasure. It was
and talking
fun.
with us. Yeah, this was great. We could have talked for hours for sure. And we didn't even really hit on Disney. So sorry about that. But we'll do a Disney themed episode.
Read Ride of a Lifetime by Bob Iger. Just a really phenomenal CEO. And I think one of the main lessons I took away from our Disney trip is really creating that magical experience for people, right? Like, people really aren't looking for a transaction. They're looking for a part of their identity to be served. And how can we do that in our company with investors? How can we do that in our company with residents? That's the big lessons I took away from Disney. My kids thought it was all rides and stuff like that. And I'm just trying to figure out the business aspects of it.
That's so cool. Well, I'm headed there in November. I'm going to have to see what I can come up with
it
as well. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much. With that,
my pleasure.
It's been Dr. Staggeberg and Dr. Schloe with another episode of the Physicians and Properties podcast, signing off. Hey, real quick, if you're still listening to this, I'm assuming you got value from it. So I need your help specifically. My 2-year vision with this podcast is to help 100,000 physicians learn how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want. There are 2 main ways that a podcast grows. One is through ratings and reviews, and the other is word of mouth. If you can please leave me a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as send this to 1 to 2 friends that you think would get value from it, we can reach the physicians that we want to reach. Thanks in advance, and talk to you on the next episode. Please note that the information shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only. It should not be considered financial or medical advice. The views expressed on this podcast are those of the host and the guest and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.